She was religious in putting on her seatbelt. Why didn't she put it on that night? I'll never know.
At 60, Princess Diana's sister finally confirms the rumors about Diana. Sarah has recently surprised the world with a powerful revelation about Princess Diana's tragic end. After years of quiet sorrow, her emotional confession stirs up unanswered questions. Could there be more to Diana's story than we ever knew? Join us as we uncover this revelation that might change everything you know about Diana. Growing close to royalty. Lady Sarah McCorquodale, originally named Lady Elizabeth Sarah Lavinia Spencer, was the first daughter born to John Spencer, the 8th Earl Spencer, and Frances Shand Kidd. Right from the beginning of her life, her name came with centuries of honor and expectations. Being part of the well-known Spencer family meant she grew up in a world that most people could only dream about. A life wrapped in elegance, duty, and tradition. Her family's history wasn't just something to learn about. It was a living part of who she was. From her earliest memories, Sarah was surrounded by a lifestyle where everything, from the home she lived in to the company she kept, spoke of heritage and pride. Sarah's childhood was spent in two very grand homes. One of them was Park House, located on the Sandringham Estate, a property that belonged to the royal family. It was here that Sarah and her siblings had an unusual but magical childhood. Living so close to the royal family meant they often crossed paths, and this early connection would later influence not just Sarah's life, but her younger sister Diana's life as well, who later became part of the royal family herself. Their other home, Althorp House, was even more majestic. This particular estate had been in the Spencer family for generations, since the year 1508. It wasn't just a place to live, it was a treasure of stories, art, and history. Althorp was massive, beautifully designed, and filled with artwork and antiques that told the story of the Spencers' deep role in British society. Being raised in such a place gave Sarah a deep sense of belonging and pride. It taught her that her name carried weight, and with it came certain responsibilities to live up to. Her education was carefully chosen to match the world she came from. She first went to Riddlesworth Hall School, a boarding school meant for children from very privileged families. There, she didn't just learn basic school subjects, she also learned how to behave, how to carry herself, and the social manners expected of someone from her background. It was the kind of place that shaped her into a young lady who understood both her studies and her place in the world. Later, she continued her education at West Heath Boarding School. This was where she began to grow even more, academically and personally. At West Heath, she was surrounded by other children from important families, and it helped her develop the confidence and social skills she would need to thrive in the upper circles of society. The experience gave her a better idea of what was expected from someone born into such a powerful name and how to prepare for it. Being born into such a famous family meant that people were always watching. Her family's close ties to the British royal family only added to the attention. The Spencers were more than just rich, they were deeply rooted in British history and had personal connections to the monarchy. This made every move they made something people paid attention to. For Sarah, this meant growing up with a deep awareness of the royal traditions and how the monarchy worked. She saw it all firsthand and absorbed it quietly, understanding from a young age how powerful and delicate that world could be. Her experiences, both in school and at home, prepared her in many ways for what her future might hold, and for her role in helping carry the weight of her family's legacy. Little did she know, these very lessons would become even more meaningful when her sister Diana stepped into the spotlight as a future princess. But before Diana's royal journey began, Sarah herself had a moment where her life touched the crown. Keep watching as we unveil how it all happened. Sarah's relationship with the future king. In 1977, Something unexpected happened when Sarah met Prince Charles, the man who would one day become king. Their meeting took place at the Royal Ascot, a glamorous event where royalty and nobility often gathered. At the time, Prince Charles was the most talked-about bachelor in the country, and everyone wanted to know who he would eventually marry. When he met Sarah, he was drawn to her right away. She was smart, polished, and came from one of the most respected families in England. The two began spending time together, and soon whispers started amongst people who began to wonder if Sarah might be the one to become queen one day. Everything about Sarah seemed to fit. She had grown up in a world that mirrored the one Charles lived in. She was used to the formalities, knew how to carry herself in public, and had been raised with the kind of grace expected of someone close to the throne. Her noble roots, her education, and her natural poise all made her an ideal choice in the eyes of many. For a while, it felt like a real possibility, like this story might end with a royal wedding. But just as quickly as it began, things took a different turn. In 1978, the relationship between Sarah and Prince Charles came to an end. The reason was simple but serious, because Sarah had spoken too openly to the press. During a casual chat with two journalists, she shared personal thoughts about her time with Charles. She admitted that while dating him was exciting, she didn't truly love him. She also mentioned some of her own personal struggles, which was not something people close to royalty were expected to share so freely. Sarah had always been honest, but in this case, her honesty didn't sit well with the royal image. Royals were expected to keep certain things private, especially when it came to relationships and personal matters. When Prince Charles found out what she had said, their relationship quietly ended. It was obvious that Sarah's sincere openness didn't match the strict expectations placed on someone who might one day join the royal family. Her words, however harmless they might have seemed, had stepped outside the quiet, careful world the royals preferred. And just like that, their chapter together came to a close. They parted on friendly terms, but the chance of Sarah becoming a royal bride disappeared. Yet this twist led to something no one could have predicted. After things ended with Sarah, Prince Charles's attention turned to her younger sister, Diana. It didn't take long for Prince Charles to be drawn to Diana. Her youth, natural beauty, and gentle spirit slowly captured his heart. As time passed, what started as a distant connection turned into a love story that the whole world would come to know. Their bond grew into a romance that led to one of the most unforgettable royal weddings in British history. But behind the fairy tale, many wondered, how did Sarah feel watching her younger sister step into the very role she once might have had herself? And what part did she play in helping Diana adjust to the overwhelming life inside the palace walls? The Shining Princess. Diana's first encounter with Prince Charles wasn't something planned. In fact, it happened through her sister. At that point, Sarah was dating Charles, and during one of their meetings, Diana was there too. She was just 16, a quiet and thoughtful girl who never imagined herself marrying into royalty. She was shy, reserved, and had dreams far from the world of crowns and castles. Still, even at that young age, there was something about her that stood out to Charles. He didn't think of her romantically at first, but she left an impression that stayed with him. After things ended between Sarah and Charles, Diana gradually came back into the picture, not as the younger sister this time, but as someone the prince began to see differently. The more time they spent together, the more Charles noticed the softness and purity in her that made her unlike anyone else. She had a kindness and charm that felt refreshing. Slowly, the connection between them grew, and by 1980, it became obvious to the public that something special was happening. People were paying attention now, and Diana was no longer just the girl in the background. She was stepping into the spotlight. At just 19, Diana found herself at the center of it all. Charles's interest in her had deepened, and soon the royal family saw her as a fitting choice. She had everything they wanted in a future queen. The relationship moved fast, and before long, the big announcement came. In February 1981, Charles and Diana got engaged, and the news spread like wildfire. All across the country and far beyond, people couldn't stop talking about it. To them, Diana was already a fairy tale princess. Then came the day the world had been waiting for, July 29, 1981. Diana and Charles said "I do" in a wedding that felt like it had come straight out of a dream. The ceremony took place at St. Paul's Cathedral, and it was nothing less than breathtaking. Around 3,500 guests were present, and over 750 million people across the globe watched it on television. The moment Diana walked down the aisle in her stunning ivory gown, made of silk taffeta, with a flowing train stretching 25 feet behind her, the crowd was in awe. She looked like royalty in every way. People from every corner of the world cheered for the young couple. The wedding felt magical. It was a moment filled with hope, and for many, it symbolized a fresh start for the monarchy. In those early days, everything seemed perfect. Their marriage looked like a promise of happiness and unity, not just for themselves, but for the entire royal family. At that point, it seemed like Diana and Charles had everything they needed to build a strong and lasting life together. Diana quickly settled into her new role as the Princess of Wales, and it didn't take long for people everywhere to fall in love with her. With every step she took, she showed kindness, grace, and a real care for the lives of everyday people. Her gentle smile and warm heart touched so many, and she became more than just a royal. She became someone the public truly admired. Charles, too, appeared dedicated as he walked beside her, guiding her through royal duties and introducing her to the long-standing customs of palace life. From the outside, they looked like a perfect team, but behind the grand smiles and polished appearances, something very different was happening. What the world couldn't see were the quiet struggles already forming between the two. Even in those early days of marriage, Diana was facing challenges that no one on the outside could have imagined. She wasn't just learning how to be a princess, she was learning how to survive under the constant spotlight, all while dealing with the emotional weight of being married to a man who was still deeply tied to someone else. One of the biggest problems in their marriage came from Charles's close connection with Camilla Parker Bowles. This wasn't a new friendship. It went all the way back to the early 1970s, long before Diana ever came into his life. Charles and Camilla had shared a strong bond for years. Even after they both married other people, they remained close. What started as friendship didn't stay that way for long. Whispers of something more serious between them began to surface, and those whispers added pressure to an already fragile marriage. Diana is said to have sensed the presence of Camilla in Charles's life even before the wedding. It was a feeling she couldn't shake, no matter how much she wanted their marriage to work. She tried to win Charles's heart completely and build a real partnership, but she couldn't escape the shadow that Camilla cast over their relationship. For Diana, this was deeply painful. She later shared how much it hurt her emotionally. It was like standing in a marriage where she never truly felt alone with her husband. She once described it as having a third person in the room all the time. The royal family, known for keeping personal matters private, expected Diana to hide her feelings and carry on with her duties as if nothing was wrong. But her emotional pain grew heavier with each passing day. The distance between her and Charles widened, and the cracks in their marriage started showing. The rumors of infidelity, once quiet, began to echo louder. People who had believed in the fairy tale started noticing the sadness behind Diana's eyes, and they could tell something wasn't right. The idea that the future king might be involved in an affair shook the public. The British monarchy had always stood for honor and tradition, and now it was being pulled into a very personal storm. It wasn't just about the cheating, it was about what it was doing to Diana. She was visibly struggling, not just emotionally, but mentally too. She felt lonely, unsure of herself, and without the support she needed. This tension started to show in the way Charles and Diana appeared in public. As more people learned about what was really going on, they started feeling more and more for Diana. Sympathy for her grew as the royal family faced a level of criticism it hadn't seen in years. The image of a perfect royal marriage was slipping away, and with it, the trust people had in the royal family's values began to fade. The impact on the monarchy was real. This wasn't just about a broken marriage, it was about the world questioning the heart of an institution they once looked up to. Charles's connection with Camilla turned out to be one of the biggest reasons why his marriage to Diana fell apart. What started as quiet troubles slowly turned into a heartbreak that the whole world witnessed. After many years of ups and downs, emotional wounds, and endless public attention, the couple finally went their separate ways in 1992. The choice to live apart didn't come suddenly. It followed a long and painful period where trust had faded and feelings were deeply hurt. Diana eventually opened up in interviews, sharing how lonely she felt and how deeply it hurt her, knowing that Charles still had Camilla in his life. 4 years after their official separation, in 1996, their divorce was finalized. Diana received a large financial settlement, but in return, she had to give up her title of Her Royal Highness. It was a turning point that changed everything for her. She was no longer officially part of the royal circle, but instead of breaking down, she chose to rise. After the divorce, Diana decided to focus her energy on something that truly mattered to her by helping others. She threw herself into charity work and started building a life that was all her own. Away from the formal world of royalty, she began shaping a new identity, one that was powerful, kind, and fearless. Through all the storms in her personal life, one person who never left her side was her older sister, Sarah. From the very beginning, Sarah had been more than just a sibling, she was Diana's rock. In a world that was often cold and full of pressure, Sarah was a warm presence Diana could always count on. Whenever Diana felt overwhelmed by her failing marriage or the weight of public life, it was Sarah she turned to. She listened, comforted, and stood by her sister without ever needing the spotlight herself. Their bond was more than sisterhood. It was a deep friendship rooted in love, loyalty, and understanding. Diana didn't have many people she could fully trust in the royal circle, but with Sarah, she always felt safe. Sarah's support wasn't limited to just private chats behind closed doors. She played an official role in Diana's royal life too, serving as her lady-in-waiting. It wasn't just a fancy title. Sarah's job involved real responsibilities, joining Diana at royal events, helping her follow royal rules, and guiding her through the sometimes overwhelming duties of being a royal figure. Sarah's role in her sister's life. A lady-in-waiting is a role given only to someone truly close and dependable, and Sarah fits that role perfectly. She was always nearby during big events, giving Diana quiet strength when she needed it most. In moments when Diana felt like the whole world was watching, just having Sarah by her side made everything feel a bit easier. As one of the most watched women on earth, Diana faced incredible pressure every time she stepped out, but Sarah's calm nature helped her feel grounded. Sarah even traveled with Diana on important royal visits, like the memorable trip to Nepal in 1993. That journey wasn't just a public appearance, it came with big responsibilities, and Sarah was there to help Diana through it all. It wasn't just about shaking hands and smiling. These visits meant connecting with people from different cultures, showing respect, and carrying the image of the royal family with grace. Sarah knew how to help Diana do all of that while keeping her calm and focused. For Diana, knowing that her sister was right there beside her someone who truly understood what she was going through, gave her the comfort and strength to step into the spotlight with confidence. In a life filled with flashing cameras, royal pressure, and private pain, Sarah's love and support were among the few constants that Diana could always lean on. Sarah had always been a steady light in Diana's life, and that quiet strength helped Diana feel like she belonged, even when everything around her felt uncertain. Though Diana faced many battles, both private and public, she never walked through them completely alone. Her sister was one of the few people she could depend on, someone who gave her courage and helped her push through the hardest days. But as Diana's life in the spotlight grew even more complicated, the question remained: could Sarah keep being that safe place, no matter what? Then came the unthinkable. In the very early hours of August 31, 1997, heartbreaking news shook the entire world that Princess Diana had died in a devastating car crash in Paris. The news of her death spread like wildfire, and millions of hearts broke at once. People everywhere, whether they knew her or had only seen her on television, were struck by a deep sadness that words couldn't quite explain. Diana wasn't just a royal figure to them. She was kind. She was warm. She cared for people living with HIV. She fought for those who suffered because of landmines. Her compassion made strangers feel like friends, and her death felt personal to so many. Across the UK and beyond, people poured into the streets, standing silently in shock. Outside Kensington Palace, where Diana had once lived, there were mountains of flowers, heartfelt letters, flickering candles, and soft toys. People cried openly, hugged one another, and stood still for hours, just to feel connected to her one last time. It became clear how deeply she had touched the hearts of millions. While the public mourned, Diana's family was grieving in a much more private and painful way. Sarah, her older sister, felt that pain deeply. But even in the middle of her own heartbreak, she understood there were things that had to be done. Diana's young sons, Prince William and Prince Harry, were just 15 and 12. They were now without their mother, and they needed love, care, and protection more than ever. Sarah stepped in quietly, but with purpose. Along with her other siblings, she stood strong to support the boys, offering them stability in a world that suddenly felt like it had crumbled. She also played a key part in putting together the funeral. It wasn't just about the ceremony, it was about showing the world who Diana really was and giving the public space to grieve with grace and respect. Behind the scenes, Sarah worked closely with palace staff and government leaders to shape a farewell that honored Diana's beautiful spirit. She wanted everything to reflect the woman the world loved. Even while dealing with her own sorrow, Sarah carried out her duties with dignity. She stayed calm, respectful, and strong for those around her. And even when the funeral was over, Sarah's role didn't end. She kept holding Diana's memory close, quietly ensuring that her legacy lived on through her children and through the causes she cared about. She mourned not just as a sister, but as someone who had lost a lifelong friend. Yet in her mourning, there was also strength. She stood tall during the funeral, keeping her pain tucked behind a soft, steady presence. For Sarah, the loss of Diana left an ache that words could never fix. But she chose to honor her sister not just with tears, but with action. As people across the world watched with heavy hearts, Sarah stood quietly but firmly beside her family, both the Spencers and the royals. Her face filled with sorrow, but her spirit focused on honoring her sister's memory. On September 6, 1997, millions of eyes were on London as Diana's coffin was slowly taken through the streets, covered with the royal standard. It was a moment frozen in time, and Sarah's presence there meant more than most realized. She wasn't just grieving, she was representing the part of Diana the public didn't get to see, the private sister, the real woman behind the crown. Standing there, she was part of a heartbreaking goodbye, sharing the weight of the loss with her siblings while also letting the world say farewell to the woman they had come to love as the people's princess. But her role didn't end with the funeral. In fact, something even more important began. Sarah quietly stepped into one of the most personal responsibilities of all, taking care of Diana's final wishes. As one of the people chosen to manage Diana's will, Sarah had to handle deeply personal items, things like letters, photographs, and keepsakes that held emotional meaning, especially for Diana's two young sons, William and Harry. Every item told a story, carried a memory, or revealed something about Diana's values. Sarah understood how important these things were, not just for the boys, but for keeping Diana's spirit alive. So, she worked carefully with legal experts and family members to make sure every detail was respected and done exactly the way Diana would have wanted. There was a quiet beauty in the way she protected Diana's privacy, even after death. She didn't treat the items like property. They were pieces of a life, a love, a legacy. Sarah made sure that the things which meant the most to Diana were passed on with care, especially to her sons, so they could hold on to their mother in the only ways left. But more than sorting through belongings, Sarah was now carrying a bigger task, the responsibility of guarding Diana's legacy. And that legacy wasn't just in photographs or jewelry. It was in Diana's kindness, her devotion to good causes, her fearless way of caring for others. It was also in her children, who were now growing up without their mother. Sarah's role as the person helping shape that legacy came with quiet trust. She had always stood by Diana, and now, even in her absence, she was doing the same. As time moved on, questions continued to haunt her. Lady Sarah McCorquodale, even years later, still carries deep pain from that awful night. There's one thought that refuses to leave her mind. The question is, why wasn't Diana wearing her seatbelt? It seems like a small thing, but to Sarah, it feels so big. Diana was known for being very careful, especially about seatbelts. It was second nature to her. Family members remembered how strict she was about always buckling up, even for short trips. That's why, for Sarah, this detail is so difficult to understand. It doesn't match the Diana she knew. The sister who always checked for safety, who made sure others were buckled up, somehow wasn't wearing hers that night. Sarah has shared how much this keeps her awake sometimes. Let's find out what she said. Sarah's revelation about Diana. For Sarah, this isn't just about a missing seatbelt. It's about a sister who's gone too soon, and a night that still feels like a puzzle. She continues to honor Diana, protect her memory, and support her sons. But deep inside, she's still searching for peace, still hoping for answers that may never come. Something that continues to bother Sarah deeply is the strange fact that none of the people in the car with Princess Diana, the night of the crash, her friend Dodi Fayed, the driver Henry Paul, or even Diana herself, had their seatbelts on. The only person who was wearing one was the bodyguard, Trevor Rees-Jones, and he was the only one who lived through the accident. This detail keeps playing over and over in Sarah's mind, especially because Diana was usually careful about safety. She always wore her seatbelt, so the idea that she didn't that night just doesn't sit right with Sarah. It adds a layer of confusion and sorrow that makes it hard for her to fully accept what happened. She can't help but wonder why. Adding to Sarah's distress was the chaos in the news that followed the crash. At first, TV and radio reports said Diana had been hurt, but was expected to recover. But her family, including Sarah, had already been told the heartbreaking truth that Diana hadn't made it. For 2 long hours, Sarah listened as the world was told something different from what she already knew in her heart. That moment left her not only grieving but also frustrated and confused. It was like living in two different realities at once. That experience left a scar that never really faded. It's part of what makes it so hard for Sarah to move on, because that night still feels unfinished, still full of questions without answers. Even today, as people look back on those events, they also begin to reflect on how the royal family has handled Diana's memory over time. Through it all, Sarah has quietly taken it upon herself to keep her sister's spirit alive. After the tragedy, she stepped forward not only as a grieving sister, but also as someone determined to make sure Diana was remembered for her heart, not just the headlines. Over the years, Sarah has spoken lovingly about Diana's gentle soul and her deep kindness. She shared stories that show who Diana really was. By taking part in causes and charity work that mattered to Diana, Sarah has kept her sister's light shining. It's her way of showing that Diana was more than just a princess. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and also click the next video shown on your screen.